is a tiny peninsula protruding from the larger Arabian Peninsula, about 100 miles and just more or less 40 miles wide. Qatar has crept into the most platinum position in the highest corridors of America's political, journalistic, economic, academic, and social life. Someone has got to take an extraordinarily close look at Qatar, who they really are, and how the heck they have purchased, invested, and spent their way into every facet of American life.
And now, The Edwin Black Show. Sponsored by the books of Edwin Black, available on Amazon and at booksellers worldwide. And now, here's Edwin.
Hello, everyone. I'm Edwin Black, investigative journalist, historian, and human rights author of 325 editions in 40 languages in 190 countries worldwide, including IBM and the Holocaust, War Against the Weak, and my latest scoop book, Israel Strikes Iran. Ours is a show for opinion makers and decision makers, not mass clicks. Subscribe for alerts at theedwinblackshow.com. And if you want to support our work, please, we need your assistance. Please visit theedwinblackshow.com/support. Your help, big or small, assures our complete and utter intellectual and uncensored journalistic independence. Go to theedwinblackshow.com/support and keep us independent. Today's episode is made possible and sponsored without any preconditions, requests, or stipulations by members of the Jewish community of Dallas, Texas. Thank you, guys. And co-sponsored by my just released scoop bestseller, Israel Strikes Iran, Operation Rising Lion, available everywhere across the planet in 12 paperback, hardback, electronic, and audiobook editions. That said, remember, I only speak for myself, and the same goes for any of my guests. Today, we welcome viewers from across America, including our 4 watch parties in the villages, Newton, Mass., Chicago, and Tampa Bay. Overseas, I see viewers logged in from most of our usuals. I have Australia, New Zealand again, Great Britain, Canada, Germany, Holland, France, Poland, Argentina, Brazil, Panama, our big one in Panama, and Israel, plus other countries. The Edwin Black Show, along with our YouTube site, speaks frankly and without tremor to a fragmented world, seeking better understanding of our tormented past, our very, very tense present, and a turbulent future still uncertain. By the way, stay tuned for my special word of wisdom at the very end of the show, just before I sign off. Now, before we dive into our burning hot episode on the Qatar threat in about 20 minutes, let's cover some pressing topics. Our world is burning, and in so many places. Item 1, the Iranian nuclear threat. The work of Operation Rising Lion is not over. The lion does not sleep tonight, because Iran is becoming cornered like a rabid dog. The Ayatollah regime is running out of threats that anyone is taking seriously and running out of room to constrain its restive population, 70% of which wants to see an overthrow of the mullahs. First, its dismembered axis of resistance cannot be maintained or rebuilt. Start with Syria, where President Donald Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio have engineered a potential, repeat potential, geopolitical makeover of the terror-prone state, Syria. Last Monday, Syria was allowed to export 600,000 barrels of oil, this was a few days ago, for the first time in 14 years. The oil was shipped out of the port of Tartus on the tanker Nissos Christiana to the international oil conglomerate B-Serve Energy, where it will swill into the global supply. Direct meetings between senior Israeli Minister Ron Dermer and Syria's foreign minister are leading to a hoped-for non-belligerency agreement, a mutual recognition of international borders, a security guarantee where Israel retains some but not all of the strategic hilltops it has seized, plus clear assurances for the Druze minority. Iran and its Shiite outlaws have been thrown out of the country. Just days ago, Israeli commandos helicoptered in just south of Damascus in a bold and cinematic mission to seize numerous Turkish listening devices that were transmitting data on Israeli movements to both Hamas and Iran. Remember, Hamas openly operates offices in Turkey, including a financial office run by terrorist Zahar Jabarin through a company called the Redden Money Exchange up on the second floor. I've got a picture. After the IDF seized those Turkish listening devices in Syria, Turkey retaliated by blocking Israeli commercial flights over Turkish airspace and Israeli shipping from Turkish ports. How this terrorist partner, Turkey, remains a central part of NATO, I will never understand. Nonetheless, Syria, as ISIS 3.0, despises Shias and anything Iran, so they're not going to be helpful. In Lebanon, the political forces are demanding that Hezbollah disarm and detach as Iranian proxies day in, day out. Israel is destroying Hezbollah efforts to reconstruct its tunnels and ammo dumps. A desperate Hezbollah is threatening to ignite another civil war if it cannot reconstitute its anti-Israel terror program. Its narco-terrorist money supply will soon be cut off because Trump has mobilized a small armada naval destroyers off the coast of Venezuela and destroyed this week its first drug smuggling on the high seas. Hezbollah is supported by several Lebanese clans settled in Venezuela and operating drugs and money laundering, especially the Rada clan operating out of Valencia and another out of a base at Margarita Island run by Hezbollah and IRGC operative Abdallah Safi al-Din. So the next time you see one of those drug shipments destroyed out of Venezuela, remember that our military's action is not only keeping our continent safe, but directly subtracting Iranian power in Lebanon. Finally, we turn to Yemen, where the Israelis pretended to be helpless to stop the Iranian-sponsored Houthi terror regime. Israel pretended it was in the dark and deliberately did not fly spy drones over Yemenite territory 1,100 miles away. Instead, Israel launched a sophisticated spy satellite which was able to track the phones and movements of the top Houthi leaders. For weeks, some 200 Israeli and Pentagon Central Command analysts hunkered down in a secret bunker in a central Israel location and reviewed detailed microdata on cell phone and personnel movement coordinated with Mossad elements on the ground in Yemen. After the Houthis launched an Iranian cluster bomb in Israel, the Jewish state reacted, and when it learned that the entire cabinet and senior military leadership was meeting in a house in southern Yemen in a locale named Beit Boz, formerly a Jewish village during the time when Yemen was ruled by Himyarite Jewish kings, that's 1,000 years ago, codenamed Operation Lucky Drop, a select group of Israeli naval assets and F-35s armed with those wonderful Rampage missiles flying low near the Saudi coastline and mid-air refueling with the full knowledge of the royal family. Israel launched a series of strikes. 12 members of the 22-member cabinet were killed. That is the prime minister of the Houthis, 9 other Houthi ministers, and 2 other cabinet ministers, and the top military commanders as well. The Houthi leadership, fearing for their next breath, is now scrambled into the hills where Israel is tracking them right now and waiting for the right moment to finish off the Houthis. At the same time, the threat of snapback sanctions has killed the Iranian economy, where the rial has dropped to a new low against the dollar. Get this, 1.06 million rials to one lowly dollar. Inflation in Iran is hovering at 30%. Intelligence agents of the IRGC just arrested the head of the Iranian Chamber of Commerce just because he reported on the economic impacts and he was forced to retract his report. The country is running low on usable fuel, usable water, and a desperate regime now openly threatened to attack America's East Coast, as well as France, Germany, and the UK with long-range missiles launched at sea if the situation worsens. Stand by for the next round. You can understand better all these dynamics with my book, Israel Strikes Iran. But know this, the world witnessed the miracle of Operation Rising Lion, but the lion does not sleep tonight. The lion is preparing to rise again at any moment. Item 2, the question of Palestinian statehood is front and center. Canada, Australia, Belgium, France, and the UK are now promising to announce recognition at the forthcoming United Nations session. No demand for hostages to be returned. No demand for mutual recognition of the Jewish state. No guarantees for demilitarization. No promise to live in peace. No assurance that Iran will not smuggle in rockets. Let's see now. Great Britain, which enslaved and subjugated native peoples worldwide from Africa to Asia across the Middle East. France, which partnered with the Nazis in World War II and never took responsibility, cruelly killing probably 1 million people in Algiers, and it built its Eiffel Tower on the blood of Haitian slaves. And Belgium, which achieved grandeur when King Leopold used corporate cannibalism to enforce rubber quotas in the Congo. Let me repeat that bit. Corporate imposed cannibalism in the Congo. There must never be a Palestinian state because the road to statehood is not traveled over the bodies of raped women and roasted children. The Arabs who conquered in from the bottom of the Arabian Peninsula and stole the identity Palestinian from Jewish Israelis do not deserve yet another state in the Middle East after the League of Nations created at least 6 of them. Israel is now in a risky chess game, openly discussing annexing Area C, that is the empty, repeat, empty parts of Judea and Samaria, unpopulated, such as the hilltops and undeveloped valleys. These are the locations demarcated in the international Oslo Accords as under Israeli control. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, the Jews are from Judea and the Arabs are from Arabia. Speaking of Jews, the Jews had better get ready for another Holocaust. Now I'm talking to you, Mr. Comfortable. Think it will never come to that? Hitler came to power January 30th, 1933. They talked about it and worked on the mechanisms for 6 years before the war broke out, and it was 9 years before the killing camp Holocaust came into being. A Palestinian state will burn at the core of this next Holocaust, just as it did during the last one with the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. October 7 brought in the new conception. It is better to be alive than to be loved. Let's repeat that. The new conception. It is better to be alive than to be loved. Thank God there is a Donald Trump protecting Jews worldwide, standing up for decency and values. He has denied visas to the Palestinian Authority and worked behind the scenes to arm Israel for the next coming battle with Iran. Could come any day. But Donald Trump won't be here forever. Jewish people, please get your head out of your tuchus. You think you are comfortable? I assure you the Jews in 1932 thought they were comfortable. You think the train is over there and on a distant track for somebody else? That train is headed to a station very near you. Item 3, Gaza. First, it has been revealed that Hamas operates some 1,500 media agents. That's double the size of the IDF's media department. This includes 1,000 cameramen with GoPros feeding live streams. They can produce and distribute propaganda videos within minutes, and they actually fabricate them. They organize them, they schedule them, and they stage them. It's called Hollywood and sometimes Gazawood. It was all under the control of the Hamas media mastermind, Abu Obaida, who was just eliminated. But his mammoth media operation remains, operated by lieutenants. This is part of why we are losing the war for public support. Second, the International Association of Genocide Scholars. The International Association of Genocide Scholars has now voted and declared that Israel is in fact committing genocide in Gaza. It's a complete fabrication. Wow, everybody ran with that story. The BBC, the New York Times, PBS, the lot. But it turns out that anyone with $30 can join and suddenly become a genocide scholar. To prove the point, some pro-Israel advocates were admitted to the organization. One used the name Adolf Hitler, and he was immediately paired up to the association's Indigenous Caucus. Another guy entered as a Star Wars emperor. A third guy came in as the Cookie Monster, and we have many more examples. This so-called Association of Genocide Scholars has now deleted its prestigious membership directory, so you won't be able to see the Cookie Monster up there alongside other scholars. Genocide is no joke, and when it becomes the latest politically exploited term, it hurts all of history. And now to our main theme, the Qatar threat. This is our gargantuan and complex issue, so this episode will just launch a series with follow-up as we have done for other major stories. Qatar is a tiny peninsula protruding from the larger Arabian Peninsula, about 100 miles and just more or less 40 miles wide. It was created with British manipulation as an oil sheikdom when the secret Red Line Agreement circled the entire Middle East to define the Western oil monopoly. In September 1971, the Qatar colony was granted independence from Great Britain. You can find out more about this in my book, British Petroleum and the Red Line Agreement. And yes, I'm the only American who has had unrestricted access to the Qatar oil archives. Qatar has made its desert bloom, not by irrigation and planting crops, but by cultivating vast fields of international influence and power. Qatar's almost magical power to operate with impunity in both the world of terrorism and the world of peak international diplomacy is driven by money. All currencies, including all cryptocurrencies. The kingdom's money is harvested from behemoth oil and natural gas deposits, as well as the petroliferous palette that accompanies those resources, such as LNG, petrochemicals, fertilizer, and steel. Among the nations, Qatar is demographically unique. Although some 2.5 million persons dwell year-round within the kingdom, only about 313,000 individuals are actually Qatari citizens. They share and wield the country's enormous wealth. For scale, 313,000 is a populace about the size of Corpus Christi, Texas, and a territory about the size of Connecticut. The other 2.2 million people in Qatar are mainly impoverished, maltreated, and/or gravely exploited foreign workers, mostly from Asia and Africa, often sleeping 10 to a room, suffering in squalor and filth, all to send money back home to dependent relatives. These serfish workers are needed to build the magnificent tinted glass-clad skyscrapers that reach to the clouds, work the scorching oil fields that feed the world's thirst for petroleum, drive the taxis that move the privilege from place to place, sweep the floors, clean the toilets, lift the heavy things, and lay hands on the untouchable stuff of life. Originally, Qatar made millions and traded untold numbers in the bloody Arab slave trade of African people and kept throngs of Slavic white women from East Europe as sex slaves. Slavery was abolished in March of 1952 when the United Nations declared slavery was a crime against humanity, and the British were forced to act to keep up appearances. At the time, there were about 1 million slaves in the Arabian Peninsula. In Qatar, slaves were then converted to the indentured servants under the Islamic kafala doctrine. Under kafala, foreign slave-like workers from India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh had their passports seized and could not leave the country without an exit permit from their serf master. 2 years ago, kafala became reformed to be less imprisoning, but the de facto system remains today. A third of Qatari, is a third category, is comprised of about 450,000 non-citizens representing the international managerial class hailing from Europe and North America. They live in comfort in Qatar in exchange for honing the operations, supervising the projects, and ensuring the indentured workers keep the kingdom gleaming as an oasis in the desert, known for its fiscal and political miracles. Dominating the kingdom is the fabulously opulent Al-Thani hereditary monarchy that cleverly survived domination by the Ottoman Turks, as well as the machinations of the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, now known as British Petroleum, and of course British colonialism. After oil and gas and slave-like labor, Qatar's main business is everyone else's business. While they pursue their unadvertised goals of enabling terrorism and the Muslim Brotherhood, which wants to conquer all peoples on the planet and bring them to Sharia using diverse public and secret means, from bombing to assassination. In 1948, the Muslim Brotherhood formed a small elite terror group called the Secret Apparatus, which assassinated a judge and many others. In 1952, they burned down 750 buildings in Cairo. The list of their bombings, arsons, killings, subversions in Arab countries, and staged riots is long and bloodstained. Understandably, the Muslim Brotherhood has been banned, officially declared a terrorist organization, and/or its leaders arrested in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, Austria, and even Jordan. Not so in Qatar, which is all in with the Muslim Brotherhood. Even though in 1991, the Qatar monarchy formally disbanded the local chapter as part of a regional deal of normalization, MB leaders have been most active in Qatar's capital, Doha. Until he died in Qatar in 2022, the monarchy hosted the MB's spiritual leader, Yusuf al-Qaradawi. What a horrible guy. In 2012, when the MB's top man in Egypt, Mohamed Morsi, won the presidential election, Qatar immediately pumped in approximately $7.5 billion in aids, loans, and bank deposits into Morsi's government. Millions more were channeled to individual Muslim Brotherhood leaders in Egypt. A year later, a military coup ousted and imprisoned Morsi and ejected the Muslim Brotherhood from Egyptian governance. In 2016, a monstrous suicide bombing occurred at the Coptic church in Cairo, killing 29. The Muslim Brotherhood publicly condemned the carnage as self-inflicted by the Copts themselves, but Egyptian President El-Sisi declared that based on his intelligence and DNA samples found, the culprit was actually Muslim Brotherhood terrorist Wahab Mustafa El-Sayed Qassem, nicknamed the Doctor. President El-Sisi said that Qassem traveled to Qatar the year before to organize the bombing. 2 weeks ago, in a bipartisan move, Republican Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart and Democratic Congressman Jared Moskowitz reintroduced the Muslim Brotherhood Terrorist Designation Act of 2025. Yet Qatar lavishly supports the Muslim Brotherhood, and especially the Muslim Brotherhood operation in Gaza, known as Hamas. After Hamas violently took over the Gaza Strip, Qatar began regular multi-million-dollar cash infusions, which now amount to about $2 billion. It was none other than President Barack Obama in 2011 who asked Qatar's emir to set up an open office for Hamas in that Gulf nation. In opulent Doha, Hamas's top leaders, such as Khalid Mashal, lived the high life in utter luxury at the Four Seasons Hotel and the Sheraton Doha, and they dined at the finest restaurants. In 2012, Qatari Emir Al Thani visited the Gaza Strip personally and pledged $400 million to Hamas. The Qatar Police Academy trains the Hamas police cadets that go on to become brutal enforcers on the ground in Gaza and then rise to become in the top echelon of terrorists in the Hamas terrorocracy. For example, in February 2023, the Hamas Interior Ministry website confirmed, quote, Ahmed Jamil Nasrallah from Gaza has graduated with honors from the Qatar Police College and has been congratulated by the Emir of Qatar himself, close quote. Every hour of every day, Al Jazeera, Qatar's government-owned, viciously anti-Semitic media giant, falsely paints Israel as a genocidal killer. Al Jazeera and its AJ Plus offshoot was effectively banned in the United States when Washington demanded it register under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. This at a time when other Gulf nations had naval blockaded Qatar for its subversive activities. Shutting down Al Jazeera was actually a stipulation made by the United Arab Emirates to move ahead with the Abraham Accords. Indeed, the very name Al Jazeera means the peninsula, which irks the hell out of the Saudis as the control of the bulk of the Arabian Peninsula, and Qatar was trying to pretend that its tiny little land abutment conveyed its ownership over all of Saudi Arabia. Yet somehow, the Qatari kingdom has become invaluable to the United States State Department, which depends upon Qatar as a go-between with the Taliban monsters of Afghanistan and the terrorist killers of Gaza. Qatar should be in the dock with North Korea and the most odious among nations. Instead, somehow, Qatar has crept into the most platinum position in the highest corridors of America's political, journalistic, economic, academic, and social life. The White House. Donald Trump is arguably the best president in the history of the United States. Nonetheless, the Trump Organization has in April of this year announced the Trump International Golf Club, Sep4, to include a luxury 18-hole golf course, golf club, and exclusive collection of Trump-branded luxury villas occupying approximately 790,000 square meters, a monster development just an hour outside of Doha. Of course, we already know that Qatar has donated and our president has accepted a Boeing 747-8 luxury jetliner to be the future Air Force One. Our dear President, President Trump, Qatar is not our partner, and Qatar should not be your partner. Qatar is also in our campuses. Almost $5 billion has flowed to such nameplate campuses as Carnegie Mellon University, which received $301 million, Virginia Commonwealth University, which received $125 million, Harvard, which has rallied some $8 million just since 2020, and Georgetown University, which received $210 million, part of a $1 billion stash from Qatari sources over the last 3 years. This connection has been roundly denounced by conservative voices, especially those concerned with anti-Semitism. So what happens? One of America's most respected conservative voices on the topic of education and the campus, former Secretary Bill Bennett, hires out as a foreign agent. Bill Bennett and Qatar. Wow. I quote from his foreign agent's registration filing of just July 3rd of this year. Here it is. And here's an appendix response. Quote, beginning on or about June 30th, 2025, Dr. Bennett will be paid $30,000 a month by the Qatari government for a 7-month period, serving as a senior education advisor to the Embassy of Qatar. In turn, Dr. Bennett, I'm quoting, will make efforts to publicize the fact that Qatari higher education efforts do not support radical Islamicist movements or positions, these are all quotes, and his engaging in publicized efforts, potentially including communications to U.S. political office holders would help dispel contrary notions, period, close quote. Bill Bennett. Qatar is in our media by training journalists in Doha to assume key positions in media worldwide, operating the poisonous Al Jazeera, and even has their hands in Newsmax. A member of the Qatari royal family invested roughly $50 million in Newsmax, a network even more pro-Trump than Fox. Qatar is in our military and that of the West. Qatar has allowed the United States, British and Australian air forces to create the fabulously equipped Al Adid Air Base. It is the largest military installation in the Middle East, used as a strategic launch point for American B-1 bombers, British Tornadoes, and Australian Hornets. Thus, Qatar is both the aircraft carrier for the Western democracies and the landing craft for terrorists who need to come ashore. Qatar became a needed go-between for Israel in its efforts to contain Hamas, and there was a point when Israel authorized Qatari cash to be hauled across Gaza in suitcases for distribution to the right people in Hamas land. I mean, suitcases filled with $30 million each month. This bizarre arrangement was nothing less than the open financing of terrorism permitted by journalism to buy peace. After October 7th, the buyer's remorse was excruciating. The list of Qatar's uncanny doubling partners with friends and foes alike is too long for one episode, but perhaps one of the most astonishing facets of Doha's diamond of influence is its connection to security in America's synagogues. Enter Michael Masters, National Director and CEO of the Secure Community Network, SCN. SCN is the official and preeminent community-controlled agency charged with keeping safe 146 federations, 50 partner organizations, and over 300 independent communities. That's a quote. Its mission encompasses everything from reviewing in-house entry-exit plans to monitoring high-level terror alerts to training of key community personnel. The agency's job is tireless and exhausting, requiring undivided coast-to-coast vigilance. The work of SCN has been made immeasurably more challenging since the October 7th massacres in Israel and the concomitant surge in anti-Jewish threats in America. More than ever, Jewish families are indebted to and dependent upon the work of SCN and its personnel. Yet in the opinion of several top leaders of the Jewish community concerned with safety, while Masters has no foreign terrorist-related conflict of interest today, he clearly did seem to have a concerning issue in the recent past. Past associations are vital in national security. Vetting and acceptance of personnel hinges on intense scrutiny of past associations. Despite a stellar current record, Masters' past associations have for months now been under a microscope. Some would argue that Masters is being charged with guilt by association. But what an association it is for a tip-of-the-spear security man whose days and nights are devoted to keeping American synagogues and other Jewish institutions safe from terrorist activities. That past association can be summed up in one word: Qatar. Several years ago, Masters began moonlighting for an international security firm which is itself associated with Qatar security establishment and senior Qatari officials. Thus, it is asked, how did a man with clear Qatari security links in his resume become the number one official shepherding the security of the Jewish community? Throughout 2023, a number of journalists, including this writer, became aware that when on October 27, 2018, the Tree of Light Synagogue in Pittsburgh was devastated with a mass shooting that killed 11. The number one person responsible for Jewish community safety, SCN CEO Masters, did not immediately fly in for a personal inspection and response. Where was Masters? He was in Qatar. Nor did Masters abruptly cancel his business in Doha and rush back to a community and a nation in shock. Instead, Masters remained in Doha, serving as the MC for a prestigious international conference entitled Forum on Returning Foreign Fighters. The event was sponsored by the Qatar Security Forum, which functions in a full partnership with the Qatar International Academy of Security Studies, the leading police and security force training center in Doha. Also attending this event were such luminaries as Khalid bin Mohammed Al Attiyah, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of State for Defense Affairs in Qatar. Top national media personalities also participated, such as CNN national security analyst Peter Bergen, moderators Steve Clemens from The Atlantic, Charlie Savage from the New York Times, and Bobby Ghosh from Bloomberg. Masters was there in his capacity as president of the Sufan Center, as he himself declared from the rostrum in the first minute of the event, as seen in a video of the conference proceedings. Yes, I have the video. What is the Sufan Center? The center is a private, not-for-profit, based in New York, with an office in Doha devoted to national security and terrorism topics. It operates at the pinnacle of the international security community. The center is named for its preeminent terrorism expert, Lebanese-born Ali Soufan. Unquestionably, the reputation of Ali Soufan in international security circles is pure platinum. His credentials have elevated Soufan to the pinnacle of the anti-terrorism community. Masters was president of the board of directors of the Sufan Center from its beginnings in 2016 through 2022, according to his own LinkedIn page and the center's annual reports from 2019 to 2018, which I've examined. The center's 990 tax filing for 2022 lists Masters on page 8 as working an average of 12 hours per week as, quote, director president. His annual compensation is listed as $49,500. And yes, I have a copy. There it is. Correct. At the very same time that Masters was functioning as president of the Sufan Center, Masters was also national director and CEO of Secure Community Network. In other words, he worked for both SCN and the public sector Sufan Center and did so simultaneously. The Sufan Center is not the only Qatar-linked intelligence and security entity connected to Masters. Alongside the center is a second entity, a private security service known as the Sufan Group, also founded by Sufan. The Sufan Group provides the most sensitive of security services to a palette of elite clients, which according to undisputed intelligence in the London-based Middle East Eye includes the government of Qatar. Masters was a senior executive of the Sufan Group, according to his own LinkedIn resume, during a 4.5-year period from December 2017 to March of 2020, serving both as senior vice president, quote, of counsel, that is, an official advisory legal role. His Sufan Group compensation is not revealed. Masters began as CEO of SCN in December of 2017, and has served continuously and with unimpeached distinction until the present. In 2018, his salary was listed on the SCN 990 as $300,000 and is currently listed as $477,000 with certain reportable benefits. During this period, Masters also worked for both SCN and the private Sufan Group and did so simultaneously. Prior to October 7th, atrocities, no effort has been made to hide Masters' dual public personas, both the one in elite Qatar security service and the simultaneous one in the Jewish community's elite security organization. Once October 7th burned through the public consciousness, along with Qatar's direct, eminent connections to Hamas, some considered Masters' associations more than just an employment curiosity. The first major article focusing on the prior Masters Qatar links was published October 31st, 2023 in the Middle East Forum, titled Exposed Jewish Security Chiefs' Deep Ties to Qatar. Quote, the article was dual bylined by MEF writers Greg Roman and Winfield Myers. Roman is MEF's Chief Operations Officer and previously served as Director of the Community Relations Council of the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh. A decade ago, the Jewish Telegraphic Agency listed Roman as one of the world's 10 most inspiring Jewish leaders. Roman was second on that list. Myers also serves as MEF's managing editor. Despite its occasional strident tone, that MEF article, which I carefully fact-checked, was meticulously accurate. However, the article went further than documenting Masters' twin roles. The article also included the troubling anatomical connections, that is, the hip bone is connected to the thigh bone. Hence, MEF's article not only mentioned the Qatari security Rome players, but by extension, who they were connected to, thus creating the fuller picture. When MEF's expose broke in October 23, American Jewish leadership recoiled. Quote, I confronted him and he said it was all in the past and much of the involvement was just on paper, close quote. I was told this by a senior member of SCN's board, speaking on condition of anonymity because he was not authorized to release SCN internal details. A senior member of the Conference of Presidents Governance stated that she was concerned about a perceived, quote, conflict of interest. Again, speaking on condition of anonymity because she was not authorized to release details on the conference's view of the matter. She added, quote, there has never been a reason to question any of Masters' judgments, actions, statements, or loyalty to our people, close quote. I should say that Mr. Masters has refused to return any of my numerous calls, and he publicly attacked Greg Roman in an open letter of condemnation. A public letter stated, quote, irresponsible and reckless journalism, such as that practiced by Greg Roman and Winfield Myers in this case, must be confronted and addressed. Not nice, Mr. Masters. The prestigious publication Tablet also wrote an in-depth article entitled, Should Jewish Communal Security Be Entrusted to Qatar? As of today, no answers to me from Masters. Undoubtedly a good man leading a good fight with a schmutzig Qatar in his background. Perhaps regrettably. In short, someone has got to take an extraordinarily close look at Qatar, who they really are, and how the heck they have purchased, invested, and spent their way into every facet of American life. I've run out of time. I had to leave out 90% of everything I swore I was going to say. But I now turn the camera to one of America's most esteemed international jurists who has long been seeking to obtain justice from Qatar. I give you one of our best. I give you Richard Heideman. Richard, what say you?
Edwin, thank you for that comprehensive presentation on so many important issues today, all tying in at the end to the Qatari threat, the title of today. I would like to address how we have dealt with and are dealing with the state of Qatar and its entities in the courts here in the United States. First, let's be clear. In order to sue a country in the United States, you have to recognize that country has immunity. The only countries that can be sued for acts of terror or supporting terror or providing material support for terror are those that are on the State Department list of state sponsors of terror. Qatar has never been on that list. Qatar is not on that list. Qatar has immunity. I would like to amend that. Qatar has immunity with impunity. They thumb their nose at every aspect of judicial attempts to hold them or their entities accountable. They fight jurisdiction, they fight facts, they don't fight fair, and they use their power. Now, what kind of power have they amassed? They've established in the United States some nonprofit entities. Their sovereign wealth fund does business in the United States. They've bought into sports teams. They've bought into businesses. They've bought into all kinds of occupational developments. In addition, they bought into our college campuses. They have spent, as Edwin so eloquently outlined, untold billions. And those billions were not reported to the U.S. Department of Education. Those billions were given to universities, not just the 5 universities that have established campuses in Doha, Qatar, in what's called Education City. American universities paid to come to Qatar and base their Near East or Middle East universities in Qatar. In addition, Qatar has the U.S. Air Base, as Edwin outlined. That U.S. Air Base gives them power long before the current administration. Qatar has been buying and buying and buying influence. Former members of Congress, former members of the administration. One of the things that Edwin covered was a relation to this gentleman, Ali Soufan. It's reported that he was a former FBI agent. And it's been reported that those people who support Mr. Masters in the SCAN network that was talked about, many of them are former FBI agents. How many of them have complained about Qatar's role in fostering hate, in funding Hamas, in sponsoring terror? See if you can find the quotes. I bet you will have as hard a time as we have had. Now, suing the state of Qatar, as I began, is a futile effort because they have immunity. The lawsuits that our firm and others that we work so closely with have pending against Qatar in federal court in New York, against a Qatar charity, against a Qatar bank, against others. They're fighting jurisdiction. They're arguing we don't do business properly in the United States in a way that you can sue us. The entities that they've established here in the United States, different charities that have fostered all this hate, that have spent all this money, seeing to it reportedly that there are professors who are teaching Islamic principles. There are professors who are teaching reportedly that anti-Semitism is right. And the price that is being paid, not only in our Jewish community, but in all of the minority religions across the United States, in Israel, and around the world, they are funded by Qatar interests. And we have to find a proper way to overcome that immunity with impunity. Congress indeed should call upon the administration to put Qatar on the State Department list of state sponsors of terror. Let's understand a few other quick things. Edwin spoke about Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera has been banned in parts in Israel, but in the United States, they have broadcasted and they teach and espouse hate, and people watch and they glam onto the words, and they come away believing that the problem is the Jews, the fault is the Jews, the responsible people for genocide, for apartheid, for racially motivated hate is the Jews. And the fact of the matter is, it's just the opposite. We know that the contribution the Jewish world has made to the larger world has been one of principled practice, supporting human life, dignity, humanity. But instead, we are painted by the Muslim Brotherhood, supported by Qatar, and supported by Qatar's influence network, not only around the world, but here in the United States, in a way that is unconscionable. You're going to hear about the Muslim Brotherhood from Clare, so I'm not going to comment, but I will close with two things. The hostages. Who's been the negotiator? The fault is put on the United States. The fault is put on the government of Israel. The fault is put on sometimes even Hamas. But the mediator handling the primary negotiations, other than the valuable role Egypt has tried to play, has been Qatar, Qatar, Qatar. So one can argue that the hostages are precious lives, those still alive and those that have taken. One can argue that the 1,200 people slaughtered on October 7th in the most barbaric attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust, that was financed by and encouraged by Qatar, and they have to be held accountable. We in the civilized world have to recognize who is it that is behind all this hate. It is not us. We are battling hate. We are standing up for anti-hate. We are standing up for dignity. We want to see a better world for all people in the region and around the world. But when Qatar is in charge, there's a price to be paid, and that high price is paid because they put out the money, and we, Israel and the Jewish people, have to bear the weight of their state-sponsored hate. We cannot permit the legitimization of state-sponsored hate any further. Qatar must be held accountable, and their immunity must be wiped out. Thank you.
Well, that was profound, and we're all thankful that you and others are working on this. I have a question for you in our brief follow-up. How is it that there are so many intellectuals in our community who know what we are talking about, that Qatar is the threat, and yet Qatar is riding shotgun on all of these national affairs, and they get to do these hostage negotiations at the Four Seasons and the Sheraton in Doha over great meals? How is it that our leadership, our Jewish leadership, our political leadership, our media leadership, how is it that they're all blind to this? Is it just the money? Is that what it is, Richard?
It's a combination of money and hate. Money because Qatar has bought America. As you mentioned a number of articles, I'll add one. Our dear friend and excellent investigative reporter, Jay Solomon, in the Free Press, Barry Weiss's organ, the Free Press, put out a tremendous piece on Qatar's buying of America. Everybody needs to read it. You have to understand the depth of their depravity and the way they have bought professors, the way they bought journalists, the way they've bought former legislators, former government officials. You commented on Bill Bennett as well. And it's just one of many, many, many. Look at what they spend on lobbying. It's beyond comprehension. But it reaches the campuses. And from the campuses, it goes to the communities. And from the communities, it goes to the high schools. And if you watch to see what has happened, not just on October 7th, but starting with October 8th, Qatar has made itself to be the hero when Qatar is the responsible party. And to answer your question, shame on all of us for permitting it to happen. The money has funded hate, and somehow or other, our community, bereft of leadership in so many ways, our community remains silent. Shame on us for doing so. We need a new leadership effort that will indeed speak out strongly and proudly on behalf of the rich history, the contribution, and the future of Israel and the Jewish people. Thank you, Edwin.
Well said. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go to one of the community's most analytical and reasoned minds, one who has studied the Qatar threat long and strong. I want to give you Yossie Hollander. Yossie, thank you for joining us on a busy, busy day. Please share your insights.
Hi, Edwin. Thank you for your own insights, and Richard as well. Qatar is buying not just the United States, they're buying the world because they can. So first of all, to talk about the source of their wealth, they have the largest gas field in the world, which is currently split between them and Iran. But they also have a new gas field, which they just started to develop, which is just their own and is twice as large as the current largest gas field. So they're heading into a limitless amount of money that they're going to have, already have, and will have. And they're using it to take control for ideological reason of the West. The entire push of the Muslim Brotherhood, as we'll probably describe by Clare, around the world is all funded by Qatar. They've taken over Europe. They're now repeating the same mechanism in the United States. So one of the probably most important and troubling things is that originally they took over the Democratic Party. The Biden administration was basically a Qatari stooge, that's my opinion. And you could have seen it in the original decision right after they started. They upgraded Qatar to be the most senior partner possible except the NATO, okay? Most favored nation status. And you'd ask yourself why, but it is, of course, because they've been bought. And what they found when Trump came to power right now again, they were really, really scared. And with all the, MAGA, Make America Great Again, that's a real threat for Qatar. So they're now spending billions, tens of billions buying the Republican Party. They're buying Tucker Carlson. You mentioned some of the Trump administration issues, but they're basically everywhere. You can see them around, and they're trying now to buy the Republican Party and take it over. They're also realized that they've taken over the universities and the big pushback there, so they're now putting a lot of money into K-12. So we're seeing dozens of companies and NGOs suddenly operating in the K-12 field, where you have like school in Northern California where they have the ABCD in second grade. So B is for BDS and I is for Intifada. That's all Qatari money coming behind it. Difficult to prove in a court case, okay, but the signs are there, okay? So they are actually replicating what the model that they did in Europe. Mandani, okay, is a Qatari agent, basically, okay? If you look at his wedding party, it was the second largest, probably, I don't know how much, but it was one of the largest in the world, okay? So where does he have the money to do that, okay? So they've done the same thing in England. In the UK, there are dozens of mayors that are now Islamist. How were they pushed around? They're trying to do the same now in Texas, okay? There's Islamic centers and there's running all kinds of Islamist candidates around the country. They have time. They don't care. They have money and they have time. And most importantly, they've realized that they can actually kill all the Jews. And they want to. They say that they do, okay? And now with the money that they have, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to take us out, not just Israel. They realize they can, in 4 or 5 years, they think they can eliminate U.S. support to Israel. And I'm not sure they're not right. And we're not fighting it. Thank you.
That was more than frightening, Yossi. More than frightening. Now, I want to make clear that we're not talking about Islam as in the world, because one of the largest centers of Islamic populations is India, which has a great relationship with Israel, as do many other, and with Jewish people, as do many other Islamic countries. What we are talking about is this dangerous Muslim Brotherhood, which has been declared a terrorist entity by so many countries in the Arab world, from Egypt to the UAE to Saudi Arabia. And in the United States, they're trying to do the same thing. I have to ask you the same question. Yossi, how in the hell have they gotten away with this?
Very easy. They can buy. I mean, in the end, money buys everything, and the amount of money they have are completely out of the scale of anything else that was been done before. I'll give you an example. They pay a retainer for every law firm in Washington, D.C. They have many lobbying firms in their employment, okay? It's very difficult. You want to go after them, ask Richard. It's almost impossible. Everybody is getting paid officially above board. The most important and most famous bribery they made is they got caught bribing the FIFA, the Football Commission, to put the games in Qatar. It's been proven that they all got millions of dollars in order to vote to have the Mondial, the World Cup in Qatar. Even after it was found, it was never changed. It should have been canceled, moved somewhere else. It was never, because they own people.
I'm happy that you've given us the benefit of your analysis, which I know goes back years. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, we want to go to one of America's most knowledgeable journalists, a former CIA manager, and an expert on all things in the Middle East, Qatar, and all things touching on the Muslim Brotherhood. Claire, take the camera. Tell us what you know.
Well, thank you, Edwin. About a dozen years ago, when I was a writing fellow at the Clarion outfit, I penned an article with the headline, Qatar, Banker to the Global Jihad. And I think that headline is probably as apt today as it was then. Qatar, Banker to the Global Jihad. And, you know, previously you all have hit most of the rap sheet, if you will, about Qatar and its role in the international jihad. But I'll just mention a couple of things very quickly. I think of Qatar as the home away from home for the Muslim Brotherhood. We've talked about that. Of course, those fleeing Egypt have landed in Qatar as well as Turkey. And in particular, as I think especially Edwin there, you've mentioned Yusuf al-Qaradawi, who was the senior juridical scholar of the Muslim Brotherhood for so many years before he passed away just a few years ago, found his home, for the most part, in Qatar, where he starred in his own weekly television program, which was wildly popular across the Middle East, the Islamic world. And of course, Doha is the headquarters for Al Jazeera, as others have mentioned, so I won't go into that. What I will also say more currently now is that, of course, Hamas, which Qatar funds lavishly, as it does others, Hamas has had its senior leadership not in Gaza, but in Doha for many years. Those in Gaza, for the most part, have already been sent off to meet their virgins. So the ones that are left are primarily in Doha. People like Khalid Mashal and a few others that remain. Of course, Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of Hamas, took an unfortunate trip to Iran, to Tehran, some time ago. And from there, he was sent to meet his virgins. So he's no longer with us either. All right, we've talked about Doha being the center where talks were held in Doha at the conclusion, if you want to call it that, the U.S. involvement before we fled so ignominiously from Afghanistan. The talks were held in Doha with the Taliban. Not sure, how much good that did any of us, except for the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and the Qataris. Of course, as you've all mentioned, Qatar has now been for some time the go-between in the hostage negotiations, the talks with Israel. The United States has been involved, Egypt, of course, and also whatever Hamas leadership is still there. But now that focuses mostly on the Gaza hostages that remain, both those living and not. Others have mentioned the penetration of U.S. universities, think tanks, lobbyists, lawyers, firms across the United States. In particular, we might mention K Street in downtown Washington, D.C. I think the point might be made here that even though Qatar is obviously a state sponsor of terrorism and should be so named, the Muslim Brotherhood itself is not a terrorist organization as far as the United States goes. And to be named to the foreign terrorist organizations list in the United States, a group must have committed terrorism, that is, violence that has harmed or taken human life, against Americans or the U.S. And of course, the Muslim Brotherhood and its front groups don't do that. But what they do, I think, is far more dangerous, and that is subversion. We in the United States do not have in our legal code, Title 18 legal code, we do not have a law against subversion. We have laws against treason, sedition, seditious conspiracy, material support to terrorism, but there's no law against subversion. And I think that's a gaping hole in our legal system, although with our First Amendment, which I know everyone else does not necessarily share, it would be a difficult thing to criminalize. But in any case, the lack of understanding about subversion, Islamic, it's not Islamist, there's no such thing as Islamism, this is Islamic subversion. The lack of understanding on the part of our leadership, our negotiators, our ambassadors, our envoys, is very dangerous, in my opinion. And those envoys, leaders, ambassadors, with certain exceptional exceptions, okay, we'll hold the door open for a few exceptions there, but for the most part, they've not studied Islam or jihad or Sharia. So when an envoy is speaking to a Qatari, senior emir of the Al Thani clan, does that envoy even know that under Islamic law, it is obligatory for a Muslim to lie to an infidel when the objective to be achieved is also obligatory? Do they even know that? I seriously doubt it, but they need to. All right, let me finish. I heard, I think it's Yossi mentioned Zohran Mamdani, the candidate for mayor, one of the candidates for mayor in New York City right now. And he, of course, is a self-avowed communist. He tries to fudge it by calling himself a democratic socialist. He's a communist. When you talk about the seizure of the means of production by government, when you talk about redistribution of wealth by coercive taxation, when you talk about government-run grocery store, that's communism, and it comes straight out of the Communist Manifesto. But others may not know is that Mamdani, who is born of Indian parents, those Indian parents are Shiite Muslims of the Ismaili sect. Ismailis, of course, are followers of the seventh Imam in Shiite Islam. Well, how'd they get to be seveners? Well, because Yemen was a sevener, an Ismaili place before people fled from there to Pakistan. Then Mamdani's parents went to Uganda, where Mamdani, was born and raised. Now he's here in the United States and running for mayor of New York City. But in his own tweet, back when X now was called Twitter, back in November of 2019, Zohran Mamdani wrote, paraphrasing just a bit here, but his affection for the Ismailis, again, that's his sect, his family sect. But then he says, but I'm an Ithna Ashara. Ithna Ashara is Arabic for 12. 12er, a follower of the 12th Imam. Who's the 12th Imam? According to the leadership regime figures of Iran, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, his top IRGC leadership, and so forth, they are 12ers. They follow the 12th Imam. They believe that that 12th Imam is the Mahdi. Now, Sunnis believe in the messianic figure of the Mahdi as well, but for them, it's just an unknown figure who will return at the end of time. But for the 12ers, it's given a specific identity, and that Mahdi is the 12th Imam. But here's the kicker. The regime in Iran, as we know, has been driving pell-mell for deliverable nuclear weapons, and still is, by the way, which we can talk about another program. But they believe, and as a 12er, Zohran Mamdani must also, they believe that they can hasten, they can accelerate the return of the 12th Imam, the Mahdi, the messianic figure, to earth to usher in the end times and day of judgment by causing enough chaos and strife and warfare on earth that the Mahdi, the 12th Imam, will feel compelled to come back and set it all straight. Now pair that with an ideology driving for a nuclear weapon. This is not good. One last note on Zohran Mamdani, another connection, and you can find more about what I'm going to tell you at the Daily Caller publication and also at the New York Post. So this is it. Zohran Mamdani's mother, Mira Nair, is a filmmaker, and she has, at least allegedly, received millions of dollars in funding from groups tied to Qatar's ruling family. In particular, she received $15 million for her 2012 film, The Reluctant Fundamentalist, whatever that means, paid for by the Doha Film Institute, $15 million. The institute, the Doha Film Institute, was founded by the Sheikha Al-Mayasa bint Hamad Al-Thani. That is the family of Al-Thani. We don't have to go into any more. If you want more details, New York Post or the Daily Caller will give you more. Let me stop there because I know that our time is short and we haven't had much time. So let's end it there and open for your questions.
Well, you did a fabulous job, and I want you to privately send me the links to the New York Post and the Daily Caller so we can examine the money that went to his family member. Okay, so now we got enough time for one or two questions. And the first one here is from our big watch party in Panama. By the way, I do not understand why we have such a large watch party in the nation of Panama, but thank you, Panama. I hope one day to traverse your canal. It says, are you not afraid of the Muslim Brotherhood and or Qatar at this point? First, I'll take a sip of coffee. No. Next question. This is from the watch party in the Villages and not far from Richard. How do we fight back? Let me take 1 minute from Richard. Richard, how do we fight back?
There have been a number of articles about the power of the president. The president can make a difference here. Forget the fact that he chose to promote and accept the tendered airplane. Forget the fact that there are people in his administration who have had close ties, still have close ties to Qatar. The fact of the matter is, if Hamas continues to hold these hostages, Qatar has to be held accountable because they helped create it. And this president, I believe, has the strength and the gumption to change the course of history as it relates to Qatar. And I hope that he will do so.
Thank you, Richard. Yossi, in 1 minute, how do we fight back?
As long as Qatar exists, the world will not be in peace. Okay? Its goals and directions are very different from the Russia and China, which is a different game altogether. Qatar must not exist as a nation state. We have to expose it, okay? We have to expose whatever is happening, because when Americans understand that what's happening in their neighborhood is Qatar, what happened to their children, like with AJ Plus, etc., is, and their education system is all funded by Qatar. I think Trump listens to the Americans. Americans have to understand.
Thank you, Yossi. Claire, in 1 skinny minute, how do we fight back?
I think it's got to be an education effort, and this helps programs like this one, but education of those who would be appointed as envoys, negotiators, ambassadors, and so forth to places like Qatar and other places in the Middle East. They have got to be educated before they get appointed to be envoys.
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time, as you know. Hold for my closing word of wisdom, just 2 minutes away. But first, I want to thank my extremely, very knowledgeable guests, Richard Heideman, Yossie Hollander, and Clare Lopez. Plus, I thank my talented international team, including Virginia and New Jersey, Lance in Michigan, Richard in the Philippines, as well as many others in numerous additional cities around the world. I'll see everyone back here in 2 weeks at 3 p.m. We got a great show planned. You want to be a friend of the Edwin Black Show? Go to theedwinblackshow.com/support. Keep me independent. You want to hear me in person? Consult my events page at edwinblack.com. Until then, head over to any Barnes & Noble in the USA or any Amazon, Walmart, iTunes, Google Books, Kobo, or Audible.com platform in 190 countries across this roiling, toiling, boiling planet, where you can find any of my 325 book editions, such as IBM and the Holocaust and my latest Israel Strikes Iran. You want an autographed copy? Hit edwinblack.com and click books. Get access alerts to participate live in future shows at theedwinblackshow.com. You'll see a much enhanced and exquisitely produced version of this show and prior episodes by subscribing to our YouTube channel at The Edwin Black Show and click the notification button like tens of thousands of others have. Follow me at Edwin Black Book at X as well as on Facebook. And now for my closing word of wisdom. Some people say, watch your back. I say, watch your front. I'm zooming out from our nation's capital. Bless all of you and pray for all that is unfolding before our very eyes.